The notification arrived at 3:58 p.m. on a Thursday, precisely early enough to ruin the evening and late enough to avoid confrontation. Subject line bland. Compensation review. Update. No urgency flag, no apology. Just quiet dismissal disguised as process. I did not open it right away. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and watched the office of Brightline Systems hum with artificial momentum. The sales team celebrated something with a cowbell they were far too proud of. The marketing department filmed a video near the windows, shouting about synergy and growth. Somewhere nearby, someone reheated fish in the microwave, an act of violence disguised as lunch. My name is Dana Cole. I am 39 years old. I am the lead contract architect at Brightline Systems, which means I write the rules everyone else pretends to understand. I build the scaffolding that keeps the company from collapsing under its own ambition. I read what others skim. I remember what others forget. I clicked the email. Hello, Dana. Thank you for your patience during the compensation review cycle. Leadership has reviewed your performance and agrees that your contributions remain strong. However, due to budget realignment tied to upcoming expansion initiatives, we are unable to approve a salary adjustment at this time. We will revisit next fiscal period. Best. Evan Brooks, Human Resources Budget Realignment. It was a polite way of saying your value is theoretical. I stared at the screen, then slowly removed my glasses and placed them on the desk. This was the fourth year in a row. First it was market uncertainty, then restructuring, then investment cycles, now expansion initiatives. The excuse changed, the result never did. What made it almost funny was that I knew exactly where the money was going. I had reviewed the bonus agreements myself. I had approved retention packages for executives who could not explain the contracts they signed. I had seen invoices for off-site retreats labeled as client development. I had processed them all quietly, professionally, invisibly. They thought I was infrastructure, necessary but unremarkable, something that worked best when ignored. Across the room, a large screen displayed a countdown to the Avalon contract signing. The Avalon framework was the largest agreement Brightline had ever landed. A multinational logistics platform valued at nearly $100 million over 5 years. The CEO called it transformative. The board called it inevitable. I called it fragile. I stood and walked past the celebration, past the glass conference rooms, named after mountains no one had climbed. I nodded at coworkers who smiled without curiosity. I entered the secure records room and keyed in the access code that no one else remembered. The Avalon Master Agreement sat in the safe, bound in blue, untouched since execution. I lifted it with care and opened to a section I had written myself late one night years earlier, back when Brightline still needed me. Section 12F. Performance-based licensing reversion tied to compliance milestones. Conditional. Precise. Quiet. I ran my finger along the paragraph and smiled for the first time that day. They told me my raise could wait. What they did not realize was that their future was already on a timer, and I was the only one who knew when it would go off. I took the binder home with me that night. Technically, removing original executed agreements from the premises violated internal policy. So did misclassifying executive travel as client engagement. So did denying compensation adjustments while approving discretionary bonuses. Brightline had long treated policy as optional. I was simply adapting to the culture. My apartment was quiet, orderly, and blissfully free of cowbells. I placed the Avalon binder on my dining table like an artifact and brewed a cup of coffee strong enough to wake regret. Then I opened my laptop and logged into the analytics dashboard. My access level was comprehensive, not because I demanded it, but because years ago the engineering team decided it was easier to give me full visibility than answer my questions. No one ever revoked it. No one ever remembered. Section 12F was not dramatic. It did not threaten lawsuits or penalties. It simply stated that if Brightline achieved 3 consecutive quarters of operational compliance at 99.9% while processing data volumes above a defined threshold, then licensing rights shifted into a shared royalty structure benefiting the original contract architect unless an explicit waiver was executed. That architect was me. I pulled the performance reports. Quarter 1 showed 99.94% uptime. Quarter 2 exceeded it. Quarter 3 surpassed expectations so completely that leadership had celebrated with champagne and a press release. Data volume was even better. 12 terabytes, then 16, then 21. The system had not just crossed the threshold, it had sprinted past it and waved. The clause had triggered 18 months earlier. No waiver existed. I knew because I would have drafted it. I leaned back and let the numbers settle. The royalty percentage was modest, 0.5%, hardly noticeable in a board presentation. But on a contract of that size, over that duration, compounded with missed notification penalties, it became meaningful. Not ruinous, just inconvenient enough to matter. I printed everything: logs, reports, board summaries, executive emails bragging about performance. I built a neat stack and slid it into a folder labeled Compliance Review. On Saturday morning, I called Victor Hale. Victor was not a friend. He was opposing counsel for Avalon Logistics, a precise man who spoke softly and listened aggressively. We had negotiated across from each other for months. We respected each other because we had survived each other. He answered on the third ring. "Dana," he said, "this is unexpected. I am auditing legacy provisions," I replied calmly. "Specifically, Section 12F. There was a pause. "You noticed that," Victor said. "Of course I did." Another pause. Longer. "That clause triggered last year," he said. "Yes. And Brightline never notified us," he added. "Correct." Victor exhaled slowly. "That puts them in breach of licensing compliance." "It does." We spoke for another 10 minutes. Not arguing, not threatening, just aligning on facts. When we hung up, my phone felt heavier. On Monday morning, I returned the binder to the safe. I wanted no distractions when the clock ran out. At 9:14, an email from legal landed in my inbox. Subject: Quick question. Avalon Agreement. Dana, can you take a look at a compliance notice from Avalon Legal? They are asking about some royalty provision. Seems like boilerplate. Just confirm we are good. Thanks, Mark. Mark was our general counsel, a pleasant man who confused delegation with diligence. I replied promptly. Happy to review. I will need time to cross-reference performance metrics and original drafting notes. Will advise. Take your time, Mark wrote back. The deadline in the Avalon notice was 48 hours. I did exactly what I was told. I took my time. And I watched the system continue to believe that I was just furniture. By Tuesday afternoon, the office felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just thinner. Like the air before a storm when people sense something is wrong but cannot name it yet. Avalon had frozen its latest payment, and accounts receivable noticed. They sent a polite inquiry to finance. Finance forwarded it to legal. Legal forwarded it to me. No one called a meeting. No one escalated. Brightline Systems believed every problem could be postponed long enough to solve itself. At 11:27, Mark from legal sent another message. Dana, Avalon is following up. They seem unusually persistent. Please confirm we are compliant and draft a response. Unusually persistent was an understatement. Avalon had not frozen a payment in 10 years. I replied with the truth, wrapped carefully in professionalism. I am still validating the performance thresholds tied to Section 12F. Given the potential financial implications, I recommend executive review before issuing confirmation. Mark responded 5 minutes later. Understood. Keep me posted. He did not read the clause. He did not open the attachment. He did not ask a question. At 1:30, I was pulled into a quarterly alignment meeting where the executive team congratulated itself on growth projections. The CEO, Richard Lane, paced confidently in front of a screen full of green arrows. Operational excellence like this is why partners trust us, Richard said. Avalon is thrilled. I watched him say it with conviction, while knowing Avalon Legal was drafting a breach notice. After the meeting, a junior analyst named Peter approached me quietly near the coffee station. Dana. I saw something strange in the ledger, he said. There is a contingent liability line tied to Avalon royalties. It keeps reappearing after system refresh. I met his eyes. Yes, I said. That would be Section 12F. Peter swallowed. Should we flag it? Before I could answer, the CFO walked by. Peter, the CFO said sharply, stop chasing ghosts. Focus on deliverables. He walked away without looking at me. I leaned closer to Peter. Send an email summarizing what you saw and the instruction you received, I said. Keep it factual. Peter hesitated, then nodded. That afternoon, I archived everything. The emails, the notices, the meeting notes. I did not escalate. I did not warn. I did not save them from themselves. Wednesday arrived quietly. At 10:02, Victor Hale emailed Mark directly. Subject: Formal Notice of Non-Compliance Avalon Agreement Section 12F. Mark forwarded it to me within minutes. Dana, please confirm this is not an issue. We need to respond today. The notice gave Brightline until close of business to demonstrate compliance or face suspension of license rights. I replied at 4:58. Mark Section 12F triggered 18 months ago. No waiver executed. No payments issued. Avalon is within rights to suspend licensing. Pending executive decision, I cannot certify compliance. There was no response. At 5:01, the deadline passed. At 5:02, my phone buzzed. Victor, deadline passed. Proceeding accordingly. Thursday morning, the all-hands meeting was already underway when three unfamiliar men entered the room. Dark suits, neutral expressions. One carried a folder thick enough to bend. Richard stopped mid-sentence. Can I help you? One of the men stepped forward. Richard Lane. You have been served. The room went silent. Victor stood behind them, calm as ever. Avalon Logistics is terminating the agreement for cause. Effective immediately. Richard laughed weakly. This is absurd. Victor did not smile. Read Section 12F. Richard did. Then he looked at me. And for the first time, he saw exactly what he had ignored. The conference room filled slowly, like a courtroom before sentencing. Richard sat at the head of the table, hands folded so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. The CFO, Elaine Morton, stared at her laptop as if numbers might rearrange themselves out of pity. Mark from legal looked unwell, sweat collecting at his temples. No one spoke while the glass walls reflected their discomfort back at them. Victor Hale placed the termination notice on the table and slid it forward. Avalon has suspended all payments and revoked Brightline license rights effective immediately, Victor said evenly. You are currently operating on unlicensed intellectual property. That sentence landed like a dropped plate. Richard cleared his throat. Dana, he said, why are we hearing about this now? I met his gaze without apology. You were notified Tuesday and Wednesday, I replied. I recommended executive review before certifying compliance. Mark looked up sharply. You said it was under review. It was, I said. The review concluded yesterday. Elaine spoke next, her voice tight. How much are we exposed? Victor answered before I could. Back royalties. Total $486,000, including interest. Penalties increase monthly. Continued use without settlement. Opens personal liability for officers. Silence returned, heavier than before. Richard leaned back, disbelief giving way to calculation. We can settle this quickly, he said. Dana, We can approve your raise retroactively. Make this go away. I smiled, small and tired. This was never about a raise, I said. It was about compliance and compensation defined by the contract you signed. Mark rubbed his face. Dana, why did you not escalate this sooner? I did, I replied. You asked me to take my time. Victor nodded. We have the email chain. Elaine turned to Richard. This could bankrupt us. Not if we move fast, Richard snapped. Dana, tell us what you want. I placed a folder on the table. Inside was a term sheet prepared carefully, calmly, without malice. Immediate payment of all back royalties, plus interest. Formal acknowledgement of breach. Reinstatement of Section 12F, with enhanced reporting requirements. Legal fees covered in full. Creation of an independent compliance office, reporting directly to the board. My appointment as its director. Elaine exhaled sharply. That is excessive. Victor leaned forward. It is cheaper than litigation. Richard read the document slowly. When he finished, he looked older. You planned this, he said quietly. No, I corrected. I documented it. Mark finally spoke, voice small. If we refuse, Victor did not hesitate. We proceed to court. Discovery will include internal communications and accounting decisions. Elaine closed her eyes. Richard looked at me again. And if we agree, Avalon will restore the license upon confirmation of payment and governance changes, Victor said. Pending my client satisfaction, Richard nodded once. Fine. The documents were signed within the hour. Hands shook, pens scratched, futures shifted. When it was done, I stood. Thank you for your time, I said. I have work to do. As I left the room, I passed Peter standing outside, pale and anxious. You did the right thing, I told him quietly. He nodded, relief flooding his face. By the end of the week, the wire transfer cleared. By the end of the month, Elaine resigned. Mark stopped delegating. Richard stopped smiling in meetings. Brightline did not collapse. It changed. And for the first time since I joined, it knew exactly who had been holding it together. Money arrived quietly. No announcement. No apology email to the staff. Just a wire confirmation in my banking app on a Wednesday morning. Numbers aligned perfectly to the cent. $486,000 plus interest. Legal fees paid separately. Clean. Final. That was not the victory. The real shift came in the weeks that followed. Brightline systems did not implode the way people expect companies to implode in stories. There were no shouting matches in hallways, no mass resignations, no dramatic exits captured on phones. Instead, there was fear. The quiet kind. The kind that rewires behavior. Richard stopped using phrases like move fast and break things. Meetings gained agendas. Decisions gained footnotes. People started reading what they signed. The new compliance office was built in a corner suite with no glass walls and no slogan on the door. I chose it myself. Quiet rooms make liars nervous. I hired slowly. Peter became my senior analyst. He earned it. He had learned early that discomfort is cheaper than denial. My first audit uncovered nothing criminal. That disappointed some people. They wanted blood. What they got instead was structure. Expense policies tightened. Approval chains shortened. Transparency replaced theater. Executives learned something new. Silence from my office meant approval. Emails from my office meant documentation. Meetings with my office meant consequences. One afternoon, Mark stopped by my door. I should have read the clause, he said. Yes, I replied. You should have. He nodded and left. No excuses. No resentment. Just acceptance. Victor and I met for lunch once a month after that. We talked less about contracts and more about wine and aging and the strange psychology of people who confuse complexity with intelligence. Avalon restored the partnership under revised governance terms. They respected Brightline again, because Brightline finally respected itself. Richard resigned 3 months later. The board framed it as a leadership transition. He framed it as a personal decision. Everyone understood the truth without it being spoken. I did not take his job. I did not want it. Power that requires applause is exhausting. Power that works quietly is sustainable. On the anniversary of the settlement, I received an email from Evan in Human Resources. Subject: Annual Compensation Review. Dana, your review has been completed and approved. No delays this cycle. Please confirm receipt. Best Evan, I confirmed receipt. Then I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The office was calmer now. No cowbells, no forced enthusiasm. People worked, people read, people asked questions before signing their names. I thought back to that Thursday afternoon when an email tried to tell me my value could wait. It had not been anger that changed things. It had been precision. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten. I did not sabotage. I simply stopped absorbing the cost of other people's laziness. They say the devil is in the details. That is not true. The power is in the person who remembers them. And this time, they remembered me. Money arrived quietly. No announcement. No apology email to the staff. Just a wire confirmation in my banking app on a Wednesday morning. Numbers aligned perfectly to the cent. $486,000 plus interest. Legal fees paid separately. Clean. Final. That was not the victory. The real shift came in the weeks that followed. Brightline systems did not implode the way people expect companies to implode in stories. There were no shouting matches in hallways, no mass resignations, no dramatic exits captured on phones. Instead, there was fear. The quiet kind. The kind that rewires behavior. Richard stopped using phrases like move fast and break things. Meetings gained agendas. Decisions gained footnotes. People started reading what they signed. The new compliance office was built in a corner suite with no glass walls and no slogan on the door. I chose it myself. Quiet rooms make liars nervous. I hired slowly. Peter became my senior analyst. He earned it. He had learned early that discomfort is cheaper than denial. My first audit uncovered nothing criminal. That disappointed some people. They wanted blood. What they got instead was structure. Expense policies tightened. Approval chains shortened. Transparency replaced theater. Executives learned something new. Silence from my office meant approval. Emails from my office meant documentation. Meetings with my office meant consequences. One afternoon, Mark stopped by my door. I should have read the clause, he said. Yes, I replied. You should have. He nodded and left. No excuses, no resentment, just acceptance. Victor and I met for lunch once a month after that. We talked less about contracts and more about wine and aging and the strange psychology of people who confuse complexity with intelligence. Avalon restored the partnership under revised governance terms. They respected Brightline again, because Brightline finally respected itself. Richard resigned 3 months later. The board framed it as a leadership transition. He framed it as a personal decision. Everyone understood the truth without it being spoken. I did not take his job. I did not want it. Power that requires applause is exhausting. Power that works quietly is sustainable. On the anniversary of the settlement, I received an email from Evan in Human Resources. Subject: Annual Compensation Review. Dana, your review has been completed and approved. No delays this cycle. Please confirm receipt. Best Evan, I confirmed receipt. Then I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The office was calmer now. No cowbells. No forced enthusiasm. People worked. People read. People asked questions before signing their names. I thought back to that Thursday afternoon when an email tried to tell me my value could wait. It had not been anger that changed things. It had been precision. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten. I did not sabotage. I simply stopped absorbing the cost of other people's laziness. They say the devil is in the details. That is not true. The power is in the person who remembers them, and this time, they remembered me.